Alright, hello everyone. Welcome back to Fist-Dented Christians. I am Dustin and I've got DJ here with me as always.
Good morning.
And we're in the feeling shed as normal on a kind of muggy Saturday morning here in Minnesota. And we were talking a little bit before we went live that last week, for those that listen each week or whatever, for the last 6 months or whatever, I've been in kind of a bad spot and mentally and whatever. And last Sunday, there was an event that kind of lifted me out of that. And the last week, it's not like it's been great and I'm uber motivated to do everything and all that, but I am motivated to do some things. So my eating has been a little better. I'm actually working out a little bit. My mental energy isn't focused on negative thoughts nearly as much. So that's been nice. So basically the short version of it, and sorry for anyone that's an atheist, but it's Jesus for me.
Well, what is the name? What's Fist-Dented Christians? Like,
Yes.
we should maybe talk about some of the spiritual stuff.
Right. So
It's Jesus.
It's Jesus.
Lord bless. Amen.
Amen, brother.
We'll tell everybody more about that because it's cool. It's
yeah,
because people probably can relate.
Yeah. So I made a conscious decision. I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever, that I was kind of done praying to God and communicating with God. I was just very frustrated that I've been a decently active Christian in my faith for the last probably 15 years, where I pray and I worship, and I don't go to church as much as I should, but I do go sometimes, and I read books on theology and think about God and try and be a disciple of Christ and all that stuff. And my life just continues to, at best, stay stuck, if not in some areas regress. And I just got frustrated, and I was just like, forget it. I'm kind of just done talking with God. I still believe God exists because it seems like the only logical conclusion, because something can't come from nothing unless it's supernatural. But I just didn't care. I was just like, oh, whatever. I'm done with it.
Kind of apathy.
Yes, very much apathy. And so, I didn't really make the correlation between my lack of communicating with God and things getting worse and more depressing the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I viewed a memorial service for somebody that I knew on YouTube last Sunday. It was posted on YouTube. And the guy's name was Jay, and he was very solid in his faith, and Jay was a very kind, gentle, caring, considerate, genuine person. And so the whole time I'm watching this, he's talking about there's a couple clips of him talking about his relationship with God and Jesus, and other people are talking about how nice and caring Jay was and all that stuff. And it was like hearing a story of a friend that I hadn't talked with in a while. And like I ended up crying a whole bunch throughout the whole hour-long YouTube video of the memorial. And yeah, I think it reminds me, there's these books called like The Case for Christ and The Case for a Creator and all that. And it's written by an author named Lee Strobel. And in it, he interviews a guy named Charles Templeton, who used to be, I think, don't quote me on this, was friends with Billy Graham and was like a big influential Christian theologian and whatever. And Charles Templeton got to a point where he couldn't accept a loving God with all the evil in the world. And so he walked away from the faith. and Lee Strobel interviewed him. And Charles Templeton, this was towards the end of his life when Lee Strobel interviewed him. And Templeton didn't have any regrets except, and I can't remember the exact wording that Templeton used, but when he talked about Jesus, he did say, he goes, I miss that friend. Like, whatever theological problems he had with reconciling evil with a loving God and all that, his friendship with the person, the character of Jesus, he still missed dearly. And that's kind of what it felt like watching Jay's memorial service. I'm like, so at one point even Jay was diagnosed with cancer, so he knew he was gonna die. And he was, towards the end of his life, he wanted to get rebaptized, and he, like, they showed a video of him at his baptism, and he just spoke for like 30 seconds before he got baptized, and he talked about like how unafraid he was. Like, he was resolute, and his spirit was happy and strong even though his body was weak. And I'm like, holy shit, I miss that. Like, I've gone 6 months without any sort of relationship with my creator, and I miss that. And so it just, that realization, because I will say, I tend to lean towards nihilism, and I need God to rein me in from that, because that's a dark place to be in. Mm-hmm. If nothing matters, if you constantly think nothing matters, that's a hard place to operate in life.
And you would know from experience,
right?
You've kind of,
yeah. So that was last Sunday. That was Father's Day. That I watched that Father's Day evening, and like I said, it's not like I'm 100% better, but I'm noticeably better. Mm-hmm. Like I said, my eating's better. I'm doing some light workouts. My mind isn't focused on all negatives. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing better, and I am very grateful for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And before we started recording, I asked you kind of like, okay, so if this is a thing, like, and again, this isn't, I mean, feeling better. Okay, I'm happier. Well, I know that's very subjective, but you know what? It's a step in the right direction, because you and I are friends, and you tell me that you're struggling, and that impacts me, and I feel bad, and then I go off into the week thinking about, like, what can we do to help Dustin, and so, or to even just walk with you on your path of struggling. But so then I asked you before we started recording, it's like, what can you do? I mean, wouldn't it be like the simple answer is to just recognize that God wants to have, or Jesus wants to be your friend and walk with you, and to do that, you have to kind of choose that, right?
Yeah.
You have to choose to do that each day.
Yes.
But you're talking about nihilism and stuff, and I think that there's a spiritual war going on, and I just was looking at a devotional I read yesterday, and knowing that Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice, the wisdom of the Word of God has been placed into our hands. The Holy Spirit has come to live inside us. And so with the work of God in you is for you and through you has not yet been completed. So that this means that sin has not yet been fully eradicated, and we are not yet all that grace will transform us to be. The last enemy of God has not yet been placed under the powerful foot of the Messiah. So the moral battle still rages. That moral battle of like nihilism versus faith, right?
Yeah.
The spiritual war still goes on. And so that means that we need to understand that we live in a war zone, and that we need to be very clear on this, that the great spiritual war is fought on the turf of our hearts, and it's fought for control of our souls. And so our lives are lived every day in the middle of this war. And it's a war of doubt and faith. It's a war of submission and rebellion. It's a war of anxiety and trust. It's a war of wisdom and foolishness. It's a war of hope and despair. And it's a war of allegiance and disloyalty. But bottom line, it's a war. And I think you are kind of hardcore in the war in terms of what you've experienced in your life.
Sure.
And other people listening they probably understand that it's a war. And so perhaps at the epicenter of our war is the question, will the Lord do what he has promised? Will the Lord provide? Can I step out in faith and courage knowing that God is with me, Jesus is with me? Will he provide what I need when I need it? Or do I have to worry that when it comes to push and shove, I won't have enough? Or God won't fix me? Or God won't ever make me quote unquote happy? Should I be afraid about God being trustworthy? When we hit hard times, when your weakness is exposed, be ready for the enemy to whisper in your ear. And Dustin, I kind of feel like the enemy has been whispering in your ear. Yeah. And you kind of ask yourself, like, where is God now? And I think that we need to be ready to respond. You know, God is where he's always been. He's always and always will be. He's with me in power, glory, and grace. And, you know, we're not always going to feel God's nearness, but you can rest assured that he'll never abandon us. And, you know, Matthew 28:20 says, behold, I am with you always. And, you know, as far as I know, God never goes back on his word. But I feel like, you know, we talk about brokenness and we talk about all these things that we go through. And I sometimes think that we kind of dismiss the notion that, you know, there's a very real war going on. You know, we are sinners. Yeah. You know, our brokenness, I think, sort of resides in sin to some degree.
Sure.
Either our sin or somebody else's sin.
Yeah.
Or I think it also resides in our circumstances.
Yeah.
And so we talked a little bit about that too before we started today. Is, you know, so if we're in a war with ourselves or with other people, and that's easy to kind of see, right? That's our own sin, either our own sin or somebody else's sin. Yeah. Versus what's the difference between that and then what's the difference with like our circumstances? So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're talking about kind of being broken, you know, defeated, you know, at a place where we're waving the white flag in our life, which I kind of feel like you've been doing for the last 6 months, is just like, I give up, right?
Right.
So is that a result of your own sin? Is it a result of somebody else's sin? Or is it a result of your circumstances? And so circumstances I would kind of equate to, you know, I was born in poverty, right?
Yeah.
Or I was born with only one arm. You know, circumstances that we can't necessarily control. Like, yeah. I'm a teenager and I was, you know, a senior, my high school senior during COVID, right? Yeah. Those are circumstances that can leave us feel broken.
Yeah.
Whereas our sin can leave us broken in terms of that's the stuff that we have to kind of we talk a lot about self-awareness. But those are the things we need to be aware of. Like, what are my sins that are causing me to be broken? Is it that I love to drink alcohol or, you know, do drugs? Is it that I have sexual immorality? Is it because I love to just eat and eat? Yeah. Is it, you know, sloth, like where I just don't do anything? Or is it trauma from another person? So sins of another, somebody who might have physically or verbally abused me over and over and over. Yeah. And so I think that all of those things that lead us to, you know, I guess it doesn't matter where the brokenness comes from or how it happens, but knowing that it either comes from ourselves or comes from other people's sin or coming from circumstances that are out of our control, the real only sort of remedy for that is what you just described at the beginning of this podcast is I don't think that Jesus is directly responsible for evil. Right. I feel like there's evil in the world, and I think biblically you could probably prove that.
Yeah.
At least biblically, right?
Yep.
So understanding that there's a war going on for our hearts, minds, and our souls, it's like, okay, well, we have a choice. And I think that God gave us that choice, and that's a whole other podcast about free will and right.
Yeah.
But I mean, God is, I think, ultimately a creative being that he's constantly creating. And so he gave, like, how great would it be if we just never had any choice? We are all just constantly aligned with God. Like, how great would that be for God to have that? But it's just not, obviously you can go back into Genesis with
Right.
Adam and Eve. And so I think, and again, I'm kind of going on and on here, and I apologize, but I think that if the remedy to our brokenness, if it derives from sin or circumstance, I think that the only way to remedy that is through our relationship with Christ. I mean, I think that's the only way. And it's not something that I can touch
Right.
or smell or hear. Although some of us might be able to say I can touch and hear God's creation all around me, in my friendship with you,
Right.
or your support for me when I'm struggling. Like that, I feel like God uses us for each other. And it's funny, I didn't say this, I said it before we recorded, but I was going to say something ask you last week about what is your prayer life been like?
Yeah.
And I didn't because you were kind of questioning just things in general, so I didn't
Right.
want to offend you any more than maybe I already had. But what can we do to go to faith? Like, is there any? Let me ask you this: is there anything that you think you could do or want to do, like consistently, that will kind of help you stay connected to your Jesus friend? I mean, ultimately, that's what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, because like we were talking earlier before we went online, I haven't really thought about it. I've just been trying to be content with each day getting better or being better. Um, so I would say, yeah, I probably taking some time each day, whether it's reading the Bible or in prayer or in worship, just some time each day that's dedicated to reestablishing that relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Maybe a little bit of all that.
could be, yep.
I was telling you earlier that, and again, this isn't like the DJ show, but I just want to say we all float away like this.
Right.
And I can tell, but it's not readily apparent to me that it's because I've not been taking the time to really have a healthy prayer life.
Sure.
Or, right? So I start to get frustrated. I start to get depressed. I start to get angry and impatient. I can feel it happening. And
Right.
you know exactly what I mean.
Yes.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like I haven't opened up. I'll like open up my devotional and be like, oh my gosh, it was April 22nd.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
It's like, oh, okay, well maybe that's it. And so what I was saying earlier is when I find that 98% of the time, if I will, read the devotional, maybe do a random Bible dip, sometimes and I should do this more, I'll just openly talk to God.
Sure.
Whether it be in a walk or whether it's just sitting at my workstation, just talk to God for like even just 5 minutes out loud, not in my head, just out loud, like Lord. And some of those moments, Dustin, have been, I mean, I'll just break down,
Sure.
or something will happen in my heart, and it's just one of those things that I have found that particular day, say I do it in the morning, it ends up being really good.
Yeah.
Like good, like I feel connected. I feel, and you can't touch, see, feel, taste, but something's there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and I talk about this in some of my trainings and stuff, is like air, trust, and love. Like you can't see it,
Right.
kind of like faith,
Yep.
but you know it when it's not there.
Right.
If you don't have air, obviously you're going to notice it. If you don't have trust, clearly you're going to feel and notice that too.
Yeah.
If you don't have love, obviously same thing. And faith, I think if you don't, so all of these things that I think are multi-dimensional and multi-sensory, that are beyond this, the five senses is it's critical. And yet it's so easy to float away from all that stuff because it's not right in front of us, right? It's not that bag of chips or that Game of Thrones or the cell phone. I can, it's not that immediate gratification.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is that I would invite you, or maybe others, to make that a very real thing, like every day, you know, I know that for me, it's like, and this is kind of what's broken me down is like, you know, I always say out loud, like, God, you know, you are my light. You are my king, because he's my king.
Right.
I mean, he's the ruler of everything. You are my father.
Yeah.
You are my friend. You are my mentor. You are my light. You know, king, father, friend, mentor, light. And
Yep.
and it just makes me feel super reverent. Like
Sure.
I become so humbled. Like, you know, the creator of all things that are growing around me, or the butterflies, or the flies, or my daughter, or my friend Dustin, like all of that creation is God's, and like he wants to have a relationship with me. You
Yep.
know, he wants to have a relationship with you.
Yep.
That's pretty humbling. So I don't know. I feel like maybe you're onto something, and so perhaps you could kind of put it to the test.
Right. Yeah, and I think part of my problem, I'm sure, is the last few years I've been on a quest to try and be as rational as possible. Like with all the stuff going on in the world and all the questions about faith and science advancing and all that, I I've really tried to push myself to not just believe in God because I believe. I
Right.
want to have rational reasons for it. And when I when social issues come up like gay marriage, I want to know, I want to investigate for myself whether I'm okay with it or not and have reasons why I'm okay with it or not. And I think what's lost in that is, I think because of free will, God has chosen to not reveal himself in concrete ways every day to everyone. And so I have a hard time with that, because that, I think I've said on the podcast before, but my one of my favorite pastors says, let your faith go beyond reason, never against it. So I'm having to like go beyond reason
Mm-hmm.
to establish a relationship with God, and that's counterintuitive to everything that we're
Mm-hmm.
taught nowadays. It's
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a loaded phrase, but follow the science. What does
Mm-hmm.
science say? What does rational thought say? What are the concrete facts? And then operate with that. Well, then you've got this thing, God, that isn't concrete, that ebbs and flows and moves, and sometimes you experience him and other times you don't, and how do I reconcile that with my rational mind thinking, well, if he's real, I should know. Like there should be some way to just know, like some concrete facts, and there's just not. And I think that goes back to free will. But I know I've been looking back on it. I know I've been struggling with my relationship with God as I decided a few years ago to really dive into investigating
Mm-hmm.
things. And
But it sounds like, I think you brought up a really good point. Is your you, it's almost a blessing and a curse.
yeah,
Your rationality has driven you to learn more about different kinds of things as it relates to what you believe.
yeah,
But at the same time, it kind of feels like it's taken you away from something that you're never going to be able to rationalize. Like,
right,
who are you to think that you can rationalize how God works? I
right,
mean, how arrogant is that?
yep,
You know, and not saying that you are. I'm just saying that you're never going to be able to do that.
right,
Not with our limited view of understanding of what God is,
yep,
so maybe it's more about reverence and just humility,
yeah,
like looking around us and the ebbs and the flows, like you said. I feel like that's. So, You bring up gay marriage a lot too, and I think that's a good example because I've been with you on that walk. I think kind of from the beginning, when we first met. And I don't think you should stop doing that, but
right.
But you're gonna come to this crossroads every time where you're just gonna have to take a leap.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and what does God mean for you? Like last week or maybe even just during this time you've been struggling, it's like God does not, he did not, and then this kind of rubbed me the wrong way last week when you said it. It's like, I'm just going to exist until I die. It's like, I don't think that that's what God's plan is for you, is to just exist in misery. That's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly at times doesn't feel like a lie, but ultimately he's gotten me this far with good friends and good family and relatively good health, so I need to focus more on that too.
Right.
You know, it's easy to get into a pity party for yourself and
so easy
focus on all the negatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's hard work to change our thinking, man.
Yeah.
It takes practice, and it's so easy. You know, and I was thinking about you this week, it's almost like you're enabling yourself to just continue to be in your place.
Sure.
Now, you don't have to agree with that, but, you know, it's like, okay, so what can we do? What can we do to, like, because, okay, let's just ask this question. Do you think God put you on this earth to be miserable and then die?
Right. In my darker moments, yes. Realistically, no.
Okay, I think Satan put you on this earth to be miserable and die.
Sure.
And to believe the lies.
Right.
I think because why would a loving creative God want you, oh well, okay, all these people over here, they're gonna be great.
Right.
But this one, you know, I'm in a bad mood today.
Right.
His life is it's bullshit.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're going to think rationally,
right,
like, rationalize that. That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
And so, if it's a lie, and you can rationalize it away to the point where you recognize openly that it's a lie, then the alternative is that that's not true, and that you were created for good things, and that you deserve good things because you are a child of God. God resides in your heart. So, like, what the hell can we do to focus on that?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, but one of my biggest challenges in life is, as rational as I like to be with, like, the world and how I interact with people internally, I am 100% ruled by my emotions. And my emotions are so much more powerful than my rational mind when it comes to self-reflection, that it's a lot easier for me to believe an emotional lie than a rational truth.
Super easy.
Yeah. And so that's where I have a hard time controlling that thought of God hates me and wants me to suffer, because the emotions tell me that, and the rational reality or truth isn't that, but because I'm ruled by my emotions, that has infinitely more weight than the rational truth. And so I'm in this constant battle, you know.
Yeah, and if you think in terms of the real world, where let's say that we have an individual who really has it out for you.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've all can relate to this. So there's a person in your life, maybe it's, say, a coworker.
Yeah.
They do not want you to succeed.
Right.
Say it's a boss.
Sure.
They don't like you. They don't want you to succeed. Actually, you know what? Maybe it's a coworker that has it out for you where they want you to get fired,
sure.
right? And so the same kind of holds true with the spiritual warfare. Is I feel like that the evil, but let's just say Satan has it out for you.
Yeah.
And so, like the coworker, they're going to find out, like, what's Dustin's weak spots?
Yeah.
Like, where are his defenses down? Like, where can I really push his buttons?
Yeah.
And I think spiritually, in terms of the warfare, it's going to happen in your emotions.
Sure.
Right? And so it's like, okay, if I'm a savvy, manipulative, evil coworker / Satan, I'm going I'm going to play on that to my advantage.
Sure.
And so, because I know that he's emotional,
Yep.
so I'm going to say things that are gonna garnish an emotional response negative.
Yep.
And so again, it's a lie. For DJ, it's abandonment
Okay.
and trust.
Sure.
And I too kind of am overly ruled by my emotions. So if I'm not getting the validation, and I hate to say it, but I have to admit it, like I need to feel like I'm important to people that I care about.
Sure.
I don't want to be deceived, and I don't want to be abandoned, and I don't want to be lied to from anybody that I love, and who does, right? But those emotions get into my head, and I feel like the evil coworker that has it out for me is going to play on those emotions and going to just feed it, right?
Sure.
Feed the flames.
Yep.
And I think that if we recognize that that's what's happening, and to some degree, yeah, I feel like there is a war for your soul, for my soul, for your soul who's listening. And we have to choose, like, which voice are we, it's that stupid cartoon with the angel and the devil,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But it's so true, though,
Yep.
And it takes practice.
Yeah.
It's like getting in, like, spiritual fitness is what it is, I think.
Right.
So, I don't know. I think this is a good topic of discussion today.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly, and then part of my, we were joking about it earlier, but it's the Jesus. Like, part of me, I don't want to be known as just somebody who blindly follows things.
And I don't think you are.
Right. But, so I have a hard time. Yeah, I have a really hard time just accepting that God and Jesus are there, and there's always going to be some unknown, something that I can't figure out. And I end up almost like embarrassed when I talk to people when they're like, well, how can you believe in God and Jesus? Well, I mean, here's all my reasons, but ultimately it comes down to a core feeling. Like, that I just genuinely believe in God and Jesus, and I have a bunch of reasons for that, but like, there's just something there. And I think, yeah, and then it's so, Jesus and God are so wrapped up in so many hurtful things that I guess I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but it gets to a point where sometimes I don't pay enough attention to God and Jesus because I don't want to seem like I'm irrational. I don't want to seem like I...
To yourself?
No, to others.
Who cares?
I know. And I shouldn't care, but I do. And that's something that I have to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I'll just admit this, and then we can sign off, but a little game that I play with myself is sometimes I'll imagine, like, Jesus actually walking with me.
Sure.
Like, if I go for a walk in the morning, I'm just, like, I imagine, like, what Jesus's gait would be like, right?
Sure.
What he's wearing, like, he's wearing his, like, normal Jesus clothes,
Yeah.
right? Which side is he walking with me on? Like, what would he point out?
Sure.
What would we talk about? And it's or I'll do it if I'm on long road trips by myself. I'll just be like, Jesus is sitting here with me in the passenger seat. Like, he wants to listen to, Metallica because, it's a nice day, And what that does is it kind of makes it real. And you know what happens? It's kind of weird. Is, like, there will be a thought
Sure.
that comes into my head. Like, this week I did that. I took a walk with Jesus, like, literally visualized. And out of the blue, not even 2 blocks up the street from my house, the thought, and I hadn't even thought about it, was like, Jesus is like, hey, dude, like, I just want to, like, I want to remind you that today, I just want you to kind of remember that being expectant and curious is kind of a big ingredient of, like, growth and experience.
Sure.
So you need to be, instead of sleeping in until 10 o'clock in the morning, like, you know what I think you should do is you should get up early and then you should go for a walk with me. Like I'll walk with you.
Sure.
And one of the things that happens as a result of being expectant of what's going to happen in the world that day. And here's another thing that I think sounds funny. Jesus, is that Jesus kind of told me. So I sound like a crazy person, but no. But again, let's just play this out.
Right.
Is he let me know? He goes, hey, because you've been in COVID, and because you've worked at home, and because all you've really seen is this, your world has gotten much smaller, and you're used to all these different routines and the familiar same sort of schedule. He goes, careful with that. While it's good, you still need to. I think that depression is kind of linked to the same shit over and over and over and over. Sure. And so you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You need to maybe drive a different way to the gym. Or you know what? If you've always wanted to check out Bachman's, hell, like listen to me. Like stop at Bachman's if you have that little thing. Like just be expectant that every day you are going to learn something new because of me.
Yeah.
Or just have a more curious mindset. And so I'm walking, Dustin, and I'm like, where the heck is this coming from? Like, and so I was so moved by it that I actually journaled about it when I got home.
Yeah.
And it all started out as a result of, you know what? I'm just going to imagine Jesus is walking with me. And then sure enough, like, again, you can't see, touch, taste, smell it, but like it's a thing. And so I don't know. Is that rational? Absolutely not. But are the thoughts that came as a result of that irrationality? Yeah, those are rational thoughts.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So how did I derive rational thoughts that are designed to help us /you/me grow from complete irrational sort of thinking?
Sure.
Interesting thought concept, right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, something to think about.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we hope that whenever you listen to this, that you have a good day and a good week. Go explore the irrational. See where it leads you. If you're a Christian that's walked away from Jesus, go try and find him again. And if you're not a Christian, hopefully you didn't get too turned off by our Jesus talk. But yeah, it's who we are, and it's what we're trying to align our lives with. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
See you later.